Welcome to week 3 of our class, Curriculum Design and Assessment. When we talk about society and model personality, we have to think of it from an American standpoint because we're Americans. And it comes to us that we have a lot of things that are different than other cultures. According to Carey Benedict, society's norms govern interpersonal relationships and produce a model personality. This American personality is different than a lot of European personalities. You think of back to the Puritan ideals, the idea of the cowboy out by himself, of pioneers who are reliant and determined on their own, of sports figures, because our country is very much about sports, a lot of people. The American soldier idea of going out and kind of saving the world. And then some newer ideas of, like the hippies where they're self-exploratory, creative, and even recently the people that were protesting in the streets, saying what they wanted and that they wanted to change society. So these interpersonal relations and produce a model personality. The attitudes and feelings and behavior patterns of most people in a society share. Self-reliant, Americans are self-reliant, helpful to neighbors, physically strong and independent. These would be considered our model personality for Americans. U.S. residents tend to evaluate their self-worth according to how much they have climbed above their parent status. And Europeans tend to be looking at the status quo of keeping the family wealth. In America, a lot of times you don't feel like you've done enough unless you are better off than your parents. That's getting a little bit harder to do lately because the shrinking middle class, and the Americans like to compare their worth against their friends and their neighbors to see that they've accomplished more. So that's kind of how Americans view personality and society. David Rezin wrote The Lonely Crowd, and it's about how America's changing. Remember, America was the first place that where democracy started. It was called the American Experiment. And Rezin said there are 3 different kinds of individuals. So there's that traditional directed character, more in a folk rule society. Little energy was directed towards finding new solutions to age-old problems. Most tasks and occupations and roles were basically the same that they'd always been for countless generations. And it was kind of, this is the way we've always done it, was kind of the mentality of that group. We moved to the inner directed, and this is really kind of started in America, where the character was characterized by increasing personal mobility, population shifts, growth and expansion, accumulation of wealth, exploration and colonization. Those are all characteristic of Americans at the beginning of the century. And the prevailing values of the inner directed society also highlighted Puritan morality, the work ethic, individualism, savings and future orientation, the nuclear family, and other adults in their life like teachers, police officers, clergy, knowing what's best and influencing the behavior of youth and children. So that's where we were. And now he says that we're moving into other directedness. And this happened post-World War II. And it's a product of society and cultural climate that has come to support and encourage teamwork, group integration, organizational behavior, and kind of disparages the individualists and the independence of the inner directed virtues. Part of this is because TV and now the internet provide young people with access to information that in the past was mainly limited to adults. The information barrier between children and adults is increasingly shattered, or at least made porous. And in some cases, the children know more about certain subjects than adults. You think about technology and how fast kids learn technology. So we're moving towards the other directed society. You've heard the phrase knowledge is power. And in our society now, it's considered that brain power is better or more valuable than muscle power. And I liked that they said that there was tend to be equalized between men and women. I don't think that's actually true yet, but we pay people more for brain power than we do to physically go out and do something. Thomas Friedman has that idea that the world is flat, that it's a globalized society. We're not just a society of our country, but you can be working for somebody in India, or somebody in India can be working in America. You don't have to, your location does not limit what you can do. What does limit you is how much education you've had. And the fact that we have continuous, overwhelming amounts of data. So we've moved from the idea that we have to find data and gather information to analyzing data. And that's pretty true when we think about the term fake news. We have to know what's real and what's substantiated compared to all the data that could be made up or by another country or by somebody just not telling us the truth. So when we talk about moral and character education, Dewey said that character and condition and environment shapes the child. Philip Phoenix talks about the important sources of moral knowledge that are society's laws and customs, which can be taught. However, moral conduct cannot be taught. It's learned by participating in everyday society that recognizes the standards. He talked about there being human rights, which involve conditions that of life ought to prevail, ethics concerning family relationships and sex, social relationships dealing with class, racial, ethnic, and religious groups, economic life involving wealth and poverty, and political life involving justice, equity, and power, that those things need to be taught and talked about in a classroom. It's not just our moral knowledge that counts, but our moral behavior in everyday affairs. This is what we should be working towards. One of the ways that teachers talk about moral education or discuss it with kids is by using good books and having children discuss characters of what is a good friend, why is this considered an evil action, what are the things that society should be concerned about, and that's done a lot of times through great books and Socratic method. As educational leaders, we have the obligation to promote character development while still recognizing there's a broad range of opinion of what it means to be moral. Understanding that our bias and prejudice, we can also be aware of how we treat people. So we have to learn what our own biases are, because everybody has them. And I think most of you are probably now doing social emotional learning. That started in 1994, and it's a process through which children and adults acquire the effective ability to apply attitudes and skills necessary to manage emotions and set positive goals, show and feel empathy for others, and maintain positive relationships. I imagine that's part of your curriculum now, and I know that when I first started teaching, that wasn't part of what we did, but it's an important part of teaching that whole child. So when you think about your own classroom and how you set up curriculum, are you more concerned with controlling your classroom or building community? There obviously has to be some control, but how do you balance those two? Is your classroom more competitive or collaborative? It can be both, but you've got to, kind of lean to one side or the other. Is the work that you have kids do, is it authentic learning or is it about compliance? And lots of education is about a compliance rather than children producing and making things. Many of you probably are using positive behavior support and developing a social contract with your kids to make sure that there is a community and you've all agreed on the norms of how the classroom will be working. And as we're in distance learning, a lot of us right now, how has that changed your classroom culture, and how do you teach differently because of not having the kids in front of you? This week you'll be reading, actually I think you'll be watching a video on Daniel Pink about motivation. And he talks about the real way to motivate people after you've paid them a decent wage is to give them some autonomy so they can make some decisions on their own. Let them master things, not even with pay, just being able to master things, and then purpose for doing what they're doing. That's a really good video. I think you'll like it. Daniel Pink also has a book called Drive, where he talks about what drives people to do things. If you ever have a chance to read it, it's a great book. He talks about the elephant being your subconscious mind and the driver being the conscious mind. So let's say you're trying to diet, and all day long you're thinking about, your conscious mind is writing down what you ate and making sure you drink enough water and getting up and exercise. But your subconscious mind gets tired and says, no, I just don't want to do it. And so at the end of the night, you end up eating 2 pieces of chocolate cake. That subconscious mind has much more control of what you're doing than the conscious mind does because it has more power. So very interesting. If you ever get a chance to read that, it would be a great addition to your library. So this week, you're going to do your group presentation. You already have your group. You should pick a challenge or an obstacle. It could be bullying. It could be drug use. It could be learning during distance learning. It could be a lot of things. You guys could just decide on your own. a minimum of 4 articles. The textbook can be one of them. Please record your presentation so I can hear your voice with it and post that in the discussion board. You do not have to respond to other people's presentations, but if you want to, you can. And please include all team members. Only one of you needs to post, but make sure I have everybody's name on that assignment. And looking ahead, you're going to be designing a unit of study with essential questions, lesson plans, and assessments. Now, this is a unit of study, not a lesson, but a unit. So think about westward expansion, or who are our friends, or helpers in the community. Those are all units of study. It's not something you teach in one day, but over a period of several days. So start thinking about that. Some of you may have already started designing a lesson or have something that you've already done and you want to improve it. And we'll talk about that the next week. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.